The morning sun painted the rolling hills of Pennsylvania in golden hues as Sarah Chen adjusted her rifle scope for what she hoped would be the final time. The weekend warrior competition had drawn marksmen from across 3 states, but none of them knew what Sarah knew. None of them had spent the last 6 months preparing for something far more important than a trophy. Sarah worked as a software engineer during the week, debugging code and attending endless meetings about quarterly projections. But weekends belonged to her other life. The Army Reserves had been her sanctuary since college, a place where precision mattered more than office politics. Today, she wore civilian clothes and carried her personal rifle, a custom-built precision instrument that had cost her 3 months of salary. The target sat impossibly far away, a small white circle barely visible even through her high-powered scope. 3,532 meters, over 2 miles of open terrain, with wind patterns that shifted like a living thing. The other competitors had given up at half that distance, declaring the shot impossible with current atmospheric conditions. Sarah's spotter, Marcus Rodriguez, lay beside her with his own scope trained on the distant target. Marcus ran a small gun shop in town and had been shooting competitively for 20 years. He'd seen impossible shots before, but nothing like this. "Winds gusting northeast at 12 miles per hour, Marcus whispered, his voice barely audible. "Temperatures rising, so you've got thermal drafts coming off those rocks at 900 meters, humidity's dropping fast." Sarah nodded, making minute adjustments to her scope. Her breathing slowed, entering the meditative state that had made her one of the finest marksmen in her reserve unit. But this wasn't about the competition anymore. 3 days ago, she'd received a message that changed everything. The message had arrived through encrypted channels that officially didn't exist. Someone had been monitoring her training scores, her weekend competition results, her progression from weekend hobbyist to world-class precision shooter. Someone who needed to know if humanity possessed individuals capable of making shots that defied conventional ballistics. The target wasn't just a paper circle. Hidden sensors would measure not just accuracy, but the precise trajectory of her bullet. Wind resistance calculations, drop compensation. Every variable that would matter when the target wasn't paper, but something far more important to the future of human civilization. Sarah had been told that other species, the ones making contact with Earth's governments in secret, believed humans were primitive, limited, incapable of the precision required for the kind of warfare that spanned star systems. They'd shared footage of their own warriors, creatures with steady hands and keen eyes, but nothing that compared to what a dedicated human could achieve with enough practice and the right equipment. The alien observers didn't understand human obsession. They couldn't comprehend why someone would spend every weekend for 6 months preparing for a single shot. They measured capability by natural talent, not by the human drive to push beyond biological limitations through relentless practice and superior technology. Marcus continued his wind readings, but Sarah had already made her calculations. Years of meteorology courses, taken during slow periods at her civilian job, had taught her to read air currents like a language. Computer modeling software, running on her personal laptop, had simulated this exact shot thousands of times under varying conditions. The rifle itself represented human engineering at its finest. Carbon fiber stock, titanium action, barrel manufactured to tolerances measured in fractions of thousandths of inches. The scope cost more than most people's cars, with glass so clear it seemed like magic. The ammunition was hand-loaded, each cartridge precisely measured and adjusted for optimal performance. Other competitors had used factory rifles and store-bought ammunition. They'd relied on natural talent and basic training. Sarah had approached this like humanity approached every challenge, with obsessive preparation, superior tools, and absolute refusal to accept limitations. The silence stretched as Sarah controlled her breathing. In through the nose, hold for 4 seconds, out through the mouth. Her heart rate dropped below 50 beats per minute, a skill developed through years of meditation practice combined with intensive physical conditioning. The rifle became an extension of her body, as familiar as her own hands. She thought about the message she'd received. Earth's governments were negotiating humanity's place in a galactic community that spanned hundreds of worlds. Trade agreements, technology transfers, territorial boundaries. But first, they needed to prove that humans deserved to be taken seriously as potential military allies. The alien species had their own version of this test. The Zentari could make shots at extreme range using their natural electromagnetic sense. The Korthek possessed mathematical minds that could calculate ballistics instinctively. The Vixari had cybernetic implants that merged their nervous systems with their weapons. But humans had something else. They had the ability to spend 6 months obsessing over a single shot. They had the drive to handload ammunition at 3 in the morning, testing powder charges measured to the individual grain. They had the stubbornness to practice breathing techniques until they could lower their heart rate on command. Sarah's finger found the trigger, applying pressure so gradually that even she couldn't predict the exact moment of release. The world narrowed to the crosshairs, the distant target, and the careful mathematics of projectile physics across impossible distance. The shot broke clean and smooth. Recoil drove the rifle straight back, but Sarah rode it like she'd practiced thousands of times. Through the scope, she watched the vapor trail of her bullet arc across the valley, climbing through the thin morning air before beginning its long descent toward the target. Time seemed suspended. The bullet flew for nearly 4 seconds, fighting wind and gravity across terrain that would challenge the best spotting equipment. Marcus tracked it through his scope, calling out adjustments that no longer mattered. The mathematics were finished. The shot was committed to the laws of physics. The bullet struck the target with a sound like thunder rolling across the hills. Even at this distance, they could see the white paper explode outward from the center ring. Marcus whooped with excitement, but Sarah remained motionless, watching through her scope as officials confirmed what she already knew. Perfect center hit, 3,532 meters, witnessed by competition officials, recorded by high-speed cameras, measured by sensors that would transmit their data to receivers far beyond Earth's atmosphere. Sarah's phone buzzed with an encrypted message. Simple text, "Report for activation Monday 800, bring your rifle, General Morrison." She smiled, finally allowing herself to feel the satisfaction of a job well done. The weekend warrior competition was over, but her real work was just beginning. Somewhere in the galaxy, alien military planners were receiving data that would force them to recalculate everything they thought they knew about human capabilities. Marcus was already breaking down his spotting equipment, chattering excitedly about the shot and demanding to know how she'd managed the wind compensation at that distance. Sarah packed her rifle with the same methodical care she applied to everything else, checking each component and securing it in custom-fitted foam. The drive home would give her time to think about what came next. Monday morning would bring new challenges, new targets, and new opportunities to demonstrate what humans could accomplish when they refused to accept the word impossible. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was a text from her civilian supervisor asking if she could work overtime next week to finish a software project. Sarah typed back a simple response, "Taking emergency leave, family emergency." In a way, it wasn't even a lie. Humanity's extended family was about to get much larger, and someone needed to make sure they understood what humans brought to the relationship. Someone needed to show them that weekend warriors could be just as dangerous as professional soldiers if they had the right motivation and enough time to prepare. The sun was setting behind the Pennsylvania hills as Sarah loaded her equipment into her truck. Tomorrow, she would return to her civilian life one last time, settling affairs and preparing for an extended absence. Monday would mark the beginning of something new, something that would determine humanity's place among the stars. But tonight, she allowed herself to savor the satisfaction of a perfect shot. 3,532 meters. In a galaxy full of species who believed humans were limited by their biology, one weekend reservist had just proven them wrong. Monday morning arrived with the kind of cold rain that made Pennsylvania feel like the edge of the world. Sarah Chen stood outside the gates of Fort Meade, her rifle case slung across her shoulder, and a duffel bag containing everything she thought she might need for an indefinite assignment. The guard checked her identification twice before directing her to a building that didn't appear on any official maps. General Patricia Morrison was not what Sarah had expected. Instead of the gruff career soldier she'd imagined, she found a woman in her 50s with intelligent eyes and the kind of calm demeanor that came from decades of managing impossible situations. The general's office was surprisingly sparse, containing only a desk, 2 chairs, and a large display screen currently showing what looked like a star map. "Sergeant Chen," the general said, gesturing to the chair across from her desk. I've been following your progress for some time. That shot on Saturday was impressive, but it was also a test, one that you passed with flying colors. Sarah remained at attention until the general motioned for her to sit. Ma'am, I was told to report for activation, but my unit commander doesn't know anything about reassignment orders. General Morrison smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. That's because this assignment doesn't officially exist. As far as the Army is concerned, you're on extended training leave. As far as your civilian employer knows, you're dealing with a family emergency. Both of those things are technically true. The general touched a control on her desk, and the star map zoomed in to show a blue-green world orbiting a yellow sun. Earth, but viewed from a perspective that made it clear the image was taken from somewhere else in the solar system. 3 months ago, we made official contact with representatives of something called the Galactic Confederation. 37 species, spanning roughly 200 worlds, with technology that makes our best efforts look like stone tools. They've been watching us for the better part of a century, waiting to see if we develop enough to be worth talking to. Sarah studied the display, watching as icons appeared around Earth representing spacecraft that were invisible to ground-based telescopes. What do they want from us? That's complicated, the general replied. The Confederation operates on principles of mutual defense and resource sharing. Each member species contributes according to their strengths. The Zentari provide advanced manufacturing. The Korthek handle computational problems that require massive parallel processing. The Vexari specialize in system integration and cybernetic enhancement. The display changed to show what looked like a military engagement, spacecraft maneuvering around a planet while energy weapons created brilliant flashes in the darkness of space. They're also at war, have been for nearly 50 years, fighting something they call the Devourers, a species that consumes entire worlds, stripping them of all useful material before moving on to the next system. Sarah felt a chill that had nothing to do with the morning rain still drumming against the office windows. They want us to join their military. They want to know if we're worth the investment, the general corrected. Each new member species requires significant resources to bring up to Confederation standards. Technology transfer, infrastructure development, training programs that can take decades to implement. They only accept species that can contribute something unique to the war effort. The general stood and walked to the window, looking out at the rain-soaked courtyard where soldiers went about their morning routines in blissful ignorance of the conversation taking place above them. The problem is that we don't seem to have anything unique. We're not particularly strong, fast, or intelligent compared to other species. Our technology is primitive. Our military organization is laughably simple by their standards. But Saturday's shot changed something, Sarah said, beginning to understand why she'd been summoned. General Morrison turned back to face her, and Sarah saw something like hope in her expression. The Confederation species are impressive, but they're also limited by their biology. The Zentari can sense electromagnetic fields, but they can't improve that ability through training. The Korthek are born with mathematical gifts that dwarf our best minds, but those gifts are fixed. They don't get better with practice. The display changed again, showing Sarah's own shot from Saturday. High-speed cameras had captured the bullet's trajectory, and computer analysis had broken down every factor that contributed to her success. Wind compensation, elevation adjustment, target prediction, breathing control. Humans are different, the general continued. We're not born with extraordinary abilities, but we can develop them. That shot you made should have been impossible for any individual of any species, based on their biological capabilities. But you didn't rely on biology. You relied on training, equipment, and sheer bloody-minded determination to push past natural limitations. Sarah studied the analysis of her shot, seeing for the first time the mathematical complexity of what she'd accomplished. Variables that would challenge a supercomputer, compensated for by 6 months of obsessive preparation and practice. They think we might be useful soldiers. They think we might be the soldiers they've been looking for, the general corrected. Every other species in the Confederation has reached a plateau in their military effectiveness. They can't get better because they're already operating at the peak of their biological potential. But humans keep getting better. We take natural abilities and push them beyond what should be possible. The general returned to her desk and pulled out a thick folder marked with classifications that Sarah didn't recognize. I'm offering you a chance to prove that theory correct. Full activation with a specialty unit that doesn't appear on any organizational charts. Training with equipment that officially doesn't exist. The opportunity to show the galaxy what humans can accomplish when we decide to take something seriously. Sarah thought about her civilian job, her comfortable apartment, her weekend routine of shooting competitions and quiet evenings with Netflix. Then she thought about the implications of what the general was describing. Humanity's future might depend on proving that weekend warriors could become something more. "What kind of training are we talking about?" she asked. The general smiled, and this time it was genuine. The kind that turns a software engineer who shoots on weekends into someone who can make impossible shots across alien terrain against targets that fight back. We have technology now that we didn't have last week. Confederation gifts to help us understand what we're dealing with. She touched another control, and the display showed what looked like a firing range, but one that defied normal geometry. Targets moved in 3 dimensions through environments that shifted from Arctic conditions to desert heat to the airless void of space. Gravity seemed to change direction randomly, and the targets themselves were clearly not human in design. "Advanced holographic training systems," the general explained, "capable of simulating combat conditions on any world in Confederation space against any known threat. Environmental variables that push equipment and training to absolute limits. The kind of preparation that takes civilian soldiers and turns them into something that impresses species with 10,000 years of military history." Sarah felt her pulse quicken as she watched human soldiers in the simulation, moving with precision that seemed almost superhuman. Their equipment was familiar but enhanced, rifles that fired projectiles capable of penetrating armor that could withstand directed energy weapons. Soldiers who moved through impossible terrain with the confidence of people who had trained for every conceivable scenario. "How long do I have to decide?" she asked. "You already decided," the general replied. "The moment you spent 6 months preparing for a single shot that everyone said was impossible. The moment you hand-loaded ammunition at 3 in the morning because factory rounds weren't good enough. The moment you taught yourself meteorology and ballistics and meditation because you refused to accept biological limitations." The general stood and extended her hand. "Welcome to Project Longshot, Sergeant. Your first briefing starts in 1 hour. Your civilian life ends today, but something much more important begins. The galaxy is about to learn what happens when humans decide to get serious about warfare." Sarah shook the general's hand, feeling the weight of decision settle on her shoulders. Outside, the rain continued to fall on a world that had no idea how much everything was about to change. But in this office, with its impossible displays and classified folders, the future was already beginning. The general walked her to the door, pausing before opening it. "One more thing, Sergeant. That shot on Saturday, it was just the qualification round. Wait until you see what we expect you to accomplish when you're properly equipped and fully trained." Sarah followed the general down corridors that led deeper into the building than should have been possible, past security checkpoints that scanned for things she didn't recognize. Behind them, the ordinary world continued its routine, unaware that one of its weekend warriors had just accepted responsibility for proving that humanity deserved a place among the stars. The training facility was vast, stretching underground for what seemed like miles. Soldiers moved through impossible exercises while technicians monitored equipment that looked like it belonged in a science fiction movie. At the center of it all was a firing range that extended beyond the horizon, somehow containing distances that shouldn't fit within the boundaries of Fort Meade. "Time to see what you're really capable of, Sergeant," the general said. "Time to find out what happens when a weekend reservist gets access to technology that can turn human obsessiveness into something that frightens aliens." Sarah picked up her rifle case and followed the general into humanity's future, leaving behind the comfortable limitations of a world that didn't know it was about to join a war that spanned the galaxy. The training facility beneath Fort Meade defied everything Sarah thought she knew about underground construction. Corridors stretched for impossible distances, lit by panels that provided perfect illumination without casting shadows. The air was clean and cool, circulated by systems that hummed with almost musical precision. Soldiers moved through the complex with purpose, carrying equipment that looked familiar but wrong, as if someone had taken normal military gear and upgraded it with technology from a century in the future. General Morrison led Sarah through a maze of training areas, each one more impressive than the last. In one room, soldiers moved through what appeared to be a weightless environment, practicing combat maneuvers while floating in midair. Another contained a landscape that shifted between jungle, desert, and Arctic conditions every few minutes, with trainees adapting their tactics to each new environment without breaking stride. "This is where we test the theory," the general explained as they walked. "Human adaptability pushed to its absolute limits. Every other species in the Confederation trains for specific environments, specific threats. But humans can learn to fight anywhere against anything if they have enough time to prepare and the right equipment." They stopped at an observation window overlooking a firing range that seemed to extend beyond the horizon. Soldiers were engaging targets that moved in impossible patterns, compensating for gravity that changed direction randomly and atmospheric conditions that shifted between Earth-normal and alien extremes. Their rifles discharged projectiles that left glowing trails, striking targets with precision that would have been impossible just months before. "Confederation technology," the general said, nodding Sarah's amazement. "Gravity manipulation systems that can simulate conditions on any known world. Holographic projectors that create training scenarios based on actual combat data from the war against the Devourers. Weapons that fire rounds capable of penetrating armor designed to withstand directed energy weapons." Sarah watched one soldier make a shot that curved around an obstacle before striking a target nearly 2 miles away. The projectile seemed to defy physics, following a path that should have been impossible. "How is that even possible?" "Smart ammunition," a new voice said behind them. Sarah turned to see a tall man in civilian clothes approaching, his face bearing the kind of intense focus she associated with engineers and scientists. "Dr. James Mitchell," he said, extending his hand. "Project Longshot's Chief Technology Officer." Dr. Mitchell led them to a nearby workbench covered with equipment that looked like it belonged in a science museum. Rifle components that gleamed with metallic perfection, ammunition that seemed to glow with internal light, and scopes that displayed targeting information in three-dimensional holographs. "The Confederation shared some interesting toys with us," Dr. Mitchell explained, picking up what looked like a normal rifle cartridge. "Programmable projectiles with built-in guidance systems. They can adjust their trajectory mid-flight, compensate for moving targets, even navigate around obstacles if necessary." Sarah examined the cartridge, noting the intricate patterns etched into its surface. "This must cost a fortune to manufacture." "About $50,000 per round," Dr. Mitchell confirmed cheerfully. "But when each round can accomplish what used to require entire artillery barrages, the math works out favorably, especially when the alternative is losing a war that could end human civilization." General Morrison picked up one of the enhanced rifles, checking its balance with the familiarity of someone who had spent decades around military weapons. "The smart rounds are impressive, but they're not the real breakthrough. The real breakthrough is what happens when you combine Confederation technology with human training methodology." She gestured toward the firing range, where soldiers continued their impossible exercises. Those men and women started as weekend warriors, National Guardsmen, civilian competitors. 6 months ago, they couldn't make shots beyond conventional ranges under ideal conditions. Now they're engaging targets at distances measured in tens of miles, under conditions that would challenge the best marksmen of any species. Dr. Mitchell activated a holographic display showing combat footage from somewhere else in the galaxy. Alien soldiers moved across a landscape of crystalline formations under a purple sky, their movements precise but somehow limited. "This is Zentari military doctrine," he explained. "They're excellent soldiers, but they fight the same way their ancestors did 10,000 years ago. They've perfected their techniques, but they can't improve beyond their biological limitations." The display changed to show different aliens, these ones moving with mathematical precision through an urban environment. "Korthek combat tactics. Absolutely optimal from a theoretical standpoint, but completely predictable once you understand their computational methods. They calculate the perfect solution and execute it flawlessly every time." Finally, the display showed footage that made Sarah's blood run cold. Creatures that seemed to be made of living metal moved across a devastated landscape, consuming everything in their path. Buildings, vehicles, even the ground itself disappeared into their maws, leaving behind only barren rock. "The Devourers," Dr. Mitchell said quietly. "They've been fighting the Confederation for 50 years, and neither side can gain a decisive advantage. The Confederation species are too rigid in their thinking, too limited by their evolutionary adaptations. The Devourers are too alien to understand, but they learn and adapt with terrifying speed. General Morrison took control of the display, showing a tactical analysis that overlaid the Devourer footage with projected battle plans. But humans think differently. We don't optimize for a single solution. We create multiple backup plans, contingencies for situations that might never occur. We prepare for impossible scenarios because we've learned that impossible things happen regularly. Sarah studied the analysis, beginning to understand the scope of what she was being asked to do. You want us to fight aliens that have been stalemating advanced civilizations for half a century. We want you to prove that humans can fight them better, the general corrected. Because we think differently, prepare differently, adapt differently. The Confederation species have reached their peak, but humans are just getting started. Dr. Mitchell led them to another workstation, this one containing what looked like a complete environmental suit, enhanced with technology that seemed to border on magic. Personal armor that can adjust to any atmospheric conditions, from the methane storms of Titan to the electromagnetic fields around Zentari homeworlds. Integrated targeting systems that can track multiple threats simultaneously. Life support capable of sustaining combat operations for weeks without resupply. The suit was clearly designed for humans, but enhanced beyond anything Sarah had seen in conventional military equipment. Servo motors that would amplify natural strength without limiting mobility. Visual systems that could see across the entire electromagnetic spectrum. Communication gear that could maintain contact across interstellar distances. The Confederation gave us the technology, Dr. Mitchell explained, but they couldn't have predicted what we'd do with it. They design equipment for optimal performance under specific conditions. We design equipment that works adequately under any conditions, then train until we can make it work optimally anyway. General Morrison activated another display, this one showing training schedules that made Sarah's 6-month preparation for Saturday's shot look like a weekend hobby. 18 months of intensive preparation, she said. Environmental adaptation, weapons training, tactical doctrine, xenobiology, combat psychology. Everything we can teach you about fighting enemies that think in ways no human has ever encountered. The schedule was daunting, covering topics that ranged from alien physiology to quantum mechanics to something called nonlinear battlefield dynamics. But Sarah had spent 6 months learning meteorology and ballistics for a single competition shot. The idea of 18 months of focused preparation for something infinitely more important didn't intimidate her. It excited her. "When do I start?" she asked. Dr. Mitchell grinned and handed her a tablet containing what looked like a university course catalog. If universities offered classes in combat applications of gravitational manipulation and psychological warfare against hive mind species. "Today," General Morrison said, "your first instructor is waiting in Lab 7, Dr. Elizabeth Santos, Xenobiology and Alien Psychology. She'll teach you how to think like something that isn't human, which is the first step in learning how to kill it effectively." Sarah took the tablet and followed the general deeper into the complex, past training areas that challenged everything she thought she knew about military preparation. In 18 months, she would either emerge as something unprecedented in human military history, or she would prove that humans weren't ready for the kind of war they were about to join. Behind them, Dr. Mitchell continued his work on equipment that would push human capabilities beyond their natural limits. Around them, soldiers trained for battles that would determine whether humanity earned its place among the stars or became another casualty in a war that had already consumed civilizations older than human recorded history. The future of the species rested on the shoulders of weekend warriors who had decided to take something seriously. Sarah adjusted her rifle case and walked toward Lab 7, ready to discover what a human could become when given access to alien technology and unlimited motivation to excel. Outside, the rain continued to fall on a world that didn't know its fate was being decided in the depths beneath Fort Meade. But in the corridors of Project Longshot, humanity's most obsessive soldiers were preparing to show the galaxy what happened when an entire species decided to treat warfare like a weekend competition that demanded absolute perfection. 18 months later, Sarah Chen stood on the observation deck of the CNS Harmony, humanity's first starship built with Confederation technology. Through the transparent aluminum viewport, she watched Earth shrink to a blue marble against the star-filled darkness of space. Behind her, the ship hummed with the quiet efficiency of systems that could propel them across the galaxy in a matter of days. The transformation had been complete and terrifying. Sarah barely recognized herself in the mirror anymore. 18 months of alien enhancement treatments had pushed her reflexes, strength, and cognitive processing to the theoretical limits of human biology. Her eyes could now see across the entire electromagnetic spectrum. Her nervous system had been enhanced with organic computers that could calculate ballistic trajectories faster than any electronic system. Her bones were reinforced with materials that made them stronger than steel, while remaining completely organic. But the physical changes were nothing compared to what the training had done to her mind. Dr. Santos had taught her to think like creatures that processed reality in ways no human had ever imagined. She could now visualize four-dimensional battlefields, predict the behavior of hive-mind entities, and plan tactical operations across distances that spanned multiple star systems. The other members of Longshot Team Alpha moved around the ship with the same enhanced capabilities. Marcus Rodriguez, her old spotter from weekend competitions, now served as the team's reconnaissance specialist. His enhanced vision could track individual targets across distances measured in hundreds of miles. Jessica Park, a former Marine sniper, had become their demolitions expert, capable of calculating explosive placements that could bring down structures engineered to withstand orbital bombardment. Captain David Sterling, their team leader, had been a Navy SEAL before volunteering for Project Longshot. The enhancements had turned him into something that could have walked out of a superhero movie, but his tactical thinking remained grounded in human military doctrine adapted for alien warfare. He understood that their advantage wasn't in matching alien capabilities, but in approaching problems in ways no alien mind could predict. "Final briefing in 10 minutes, Captain Sterling announced over the ship's communication system. His voice carried the calm authority of someone who had spent months preparing for what they were about to attempt. Target zone analysis just came in from reconnaissance drones. Sarah made her way to the briefing room, checking her equipment one final time. Her rifle was a work of art that combined Confederation materials science with human engineering philosophy. The weapon could fire smart rounds capable of penetrating any known armor, but it could also function with conventional ammunition if necessary. The targeting system was integrated directly into her enhanced nervous system, creating a weapon-soldier interface that responded to thought rather than physical manipulation. The briefing room's holographic projector activated as the team assembled, displaying a three-dimensional map of their target. The planet Zirion 7 hung in space like a wounded jewel, its surface scarred by 50 years of warfare. Crystalline formations that had once been cities jutted from landscapes stripped of all organic matter. In the distance, Devourer ships continued their systematic consumption of anything that might be useful to their incomprehensible civilization. "This is what we trained for," Captain Sterling said, manipulating the display to show tactical details. "The Confederation has been trying to retake Zirion 7 for 15 years. 3 separate assault attempts, all failures. The Devourers have fortified the planet with defensive systems that adapt to any conventional attack pattern." The display zoomed in on specific locations, showing Devourer fortifications that defied normal military architecture. Structures that seemed to grow rather than being built, weapon systems that could reconfigure themselves in real time, defensive networks that learned from each attack and adapted accordingly. Standard Confederation doctrine calls for overwhelming force applied to predetermined tactical objectives, Captain Sterling continued. The problem is that the Devourers learn from each engagement. By the time the main assault begins, they've already adapted to counter every planned approach. Sarah studied the tactical overlay, noting patterns that reminded her of problems she'd solved during training. Complex, multivariable scenarios that required unconventional solutions. "What's our approach?" Captain Sterling smiled, and Sarah recognized the expression from their training exercises. It was the look of someone who was about to attempt something that conventional military wisdom said was impossible. "We're going to do what humans do best. We're going to improvise." The display changed to show infiltration routes that avoided all major defensive positions. Instead of attacking the strongest points, they would target seemingly insignificant locations that conventional analysis had dismissed as irrelevant. Their objective wasn't to capture territory or destroy specific installations. Their job was to create chaos in ways that no alien mind could predict or adapt to. The Devourers think in terms of optimal resource allocation, Captain Sterling explained. They calculate the most efficient defensive arrangements and implement them perfectly, but they can't account for attacks that are deliberately inefficient, that target objectives with no apparent strategic value. Marcus activated his portion of the briefing, displaying reconnaissance data gathered by stealth drones that had penetrated Devourer territory undetected. Sarah's primary target is this communication relay, he said, highlighting a structure that looked like a metallic tree growing from crystalline ground. Range, 43 miles. Environmental conditions, methane atmosphere, variable gravity, electromagnetic interference that would blind most targeting systems. Sarah examined the targeting data, already running calculations in her enhanced mind. The shot was theoretically possible, but only if she could compensate for variables that changed unpredictably. Atmospheric density that fluctuated with the planet's rotation. Gravity that strengthened and weakened based on the positions of 3 moons. Electromagnetic storms that could deflect projectiles by several degrees. Standard doctrine would call for close assault with heavy weapons, Marcus continued. But that approach has failed 3 times. The relay rebuilds itself faster than conventional forces can destroy it. What makes you think a single shot will work better? Sarah asked. Captain Sterling manipulated the display to show detailed analysis of the relay's construction. Because the Devourers designed it to withstand sustained bombardment. They've never encountered precision attacks that target specific components instead of attempting total destruction. One round, placed correctly, can create cascade failures that will take months to repair. The target was a component the size of a dinner plate, protected by armor that could withstand direct hits from orbital weapons. But the armor was designed to distribute impact forces across the entire structure. A projectile that penetrated at precisely the right angle, carrying the right payload, could cause internal damage that would propagate through the entire relay system. Jessica Park took over the briefing, showing the specialized ammunition that had been developed specifically for this mission. Shape charge penetrator with a programmable delay, she explained. The round punches through the armor, then detonates inside the target with precisely timed secondary explosions. But the timing has to be perfect, calculated based on atmospheric conditions at the moment of impact. Sarah hefted one of the specialized rounds, feeling the weight of technology that had cost more than most people earned in a lifetime. Each cartridge contained guidance systems, atmospheric sensors, and explosive charges that could be adjusted in real time. But the technology was worthless without the human ability to make impossible shots under conditions that no amount of planning could fully predict. Time to target zone, 6 hours, Captain Sterling announced. Final equipment checks in 2 hours. Everyone gets some rest. Tomorrow we find out if 18 months of training was worth it. Sarah returned to her quarters, a space barely large enough for a bed and personal storage. The walls displayed a view of space that was simultaneously beautiful and terrifying. Somewhere in that darkness, an alien civilization continued its systematic consumption of worlds that had once supported life. Tomorrow, she would fire a single shot that could begin turning the tide in humanity's favor. She opened her personal communication tablet and composed a message to her parents, still believing their daughter was on extended military training exercises. The message was carefully censored, revealing nothing about her location or mission. She told them she was well, that her training was challenging but rewarding, and that she looked forward to seeing them soon. The truth was that she had no idea if she would ever see Earth again. The mission was classified as extremely high risk, with contingency plans that assumed total team loss. But that knowledge didn't frighten her. 18 months of training had taught her to embrace uncertainty, to find opportunity in situations where conventional planning failed. Outside her viewport, the stars wheeled slowly as the ship adjusted its course toward Zirion 7. Somewhere among those points of light were civilizations that had been fighting the Devourers for decades, species with technology and capabilities that dwarfed anything humans had achieved. All of them had failed to accomplish what she was about to attempt with a single rifle and 18 months of obsessive preparation. Sarah smiled and began her final equipment check. Tomorrow, the galaxy would discover what happened when humans decided to take alien warfare as seriously as they took weekend shooting competitions. Tomorrow, one shot would determine whether humanity's approach to impossible problems was the key to winning an unwinnable war. The surface of Zirion 7 was a landscape from humanity's worst nightmares. Sarah crouched behind crystalline formations that had once been a shopping center, watching through her scope as Devourer patrols moved across terrain that defied normal geology. The ground itself seemed alive, rippling with metallic veins that pulsed with alien energy. Above them, the methane atmosphere swirled in patterns that created optical illusions, making distance and direction difficult to determine. The infiltration had gone perfectly, which was the first sign that something was wrong. 18 months of training had taught Sarah to be suspicious of operations that proceeded according to plan. Enemy forces this sophisticated shouldn't be vulnerable to simple stealth approaches. The fact that they had reached their firing position without detection suggested that the Devourers either didn't care about their presence or had plans of their own. "Target acquired," Sarah whispered into her throat microphone, adjusting her scope for the atmospheric conditions that had been fluctuating since they landed. 43 miles away, the communication relay rose from the alien landscape like a metallic tree, its branches crackling with energy that her enhanced vision could see across multiple spectrums. Marcus lay beside her with his spotting equipment, but the electromagnetic interference was making his instruments unreliable. "Atmospheric density is shifting," he reported. "Gravity variance is stronger than predicted. That moon transit is affecting local spacetime in ways our models didn't account for." The shooting position was a compromise between concealment and clear line of sight. They were hidden among crystal formations that provided excellent cover but created optical distortions that made long-range shooting even more challenging. The Devourer relay was visible, but the intervening terrain included gravity wells, electromagnetic storms, and atmospheric conditions that changed unpredictably. Captain Sterling's voice crackled through their communication system from his position 2 miles away. "Longshot Alpha, be advised we have movement on the perimeter. Devourer forces are repositioning, but not toward your location. They're pulling back from the relay area." Sarah felt ice in her stomach. Pulling back meant either they were about to abandon the relay entirely, or they were preparing for something that required clear fields of fire. Neither option was good for a sniper team that needed 18 minutes to complete their mission and withdraw. "Could be a trap," Marcus muttered, scanning the area around the relay through his scope. "Or maybe they're just rotating shifts." Sarah made minute adjustments to her rifle, compensating for atmospheric variables that her enhanced nervous system was calculating in real time. The smart round in her chamber could adjust its trajectory during flight, but only within limits. If her initial calculations were wrong by more than a few degrees, all the technology in the galaxy wouldn't save the shot. Through her scope, she could see details of the relay that had never appeared in reconnaissance photos. The structure was more organic than mechanical, growing from the planet's surface like a plant that had evolved in some alien ecosystem. Energy flowed through its branches in patterns that reminded her of blood vessels, pulsing with rhythms that seemed almost like a heartbeat. The target component was exactly where intelligence had predicted, a crystalline node the size of a dinner plate embedded in the relay's main trunk. But the approaches were different than expected. The node was protected by overlapping energy fields that deflected incoming projectiles, and the fields were rotating in patterns that created windows of opportunity lasting only microseconds. "Field rotation pattern acquired," Sarah reported, watching the energy barriers shift around her target. Her enhanced vision could track the rotation faster than any conventional optical system, but hitting a moving target through a gap that existed for less than 1/10 of a second would require timing that pushed human capabilities beyond their theoretical limits. Marcus updated his readings as another gravity wave washed across their position. "Atmospheric density just dropped 15%. Gravity variance is accelerating. You've got maybe 2 more minutes before conditions become impossible." Sarah steadied her breathing, entering the meditative state that 18 months of training had made as automatic as walking. Her heart rate dropped below 40 beats per minute. Her enhanced nervous system began calculating trajectories that took into account variables that conventional ballistics couldn't measure. The rifle became an extension of her will, as familiar as her own hands. Captain Sterling's voice cut through her concentration. "Longshot Alpha, we have a problem. Long-range scans show Devourer reinforcements inbound. Estimate arrival in 15 minutes. Extraction window is closing fast." 15 minutes. More than enough time to make the shot and withdraw if everything went according to plan. But Sarah had learned that plans were suggestions that reality enjoyed ignoring. She focused on the target, watching the energy field rotations and calculating the precise moment when all variables would align. The wind patterns were wrong. The gravity variance was stronger than predicted. The electromagnetic interference was affecting her scope's targeting system in ways that shouldn't have been possible. But Sarah had trained for impossible shots under impossible conditions. She had learned to succeed when conventional wisdom said success was impossible. "Taking the shot," she whispered, her finger finding the trigger with the familiarity of 18 months of practice. The world narrowed to the crosshairs, the distant target, and the mathematical poetry of projectile physics across alien terrain. The shot broke clean and perfect. Recoil drove the rifle straight back, but Sarah rode it smoothly while tracking the projectile through her scope. The smart round flew across 43 miles of hostile terrain, adjusting its trajectory as atmospheric conditions changed around it. Through her enhanced vision, she could see the bullet's vapor trail as it threaded through electromagnetic storms and gravity wells. The round struck the energy field barrier at the exact microsecond when the rotation created an opening. It punched through the crystalline node with mathematical precision, penetrating into the relay's core before the shaped charge detonated with perfectly timed explosions that propagated through the alien structure. The relay died like a living thing, its energy patterns flickering and fading as cascade failures spread through systems that had operated flawlessly for decades. Secondary explosions erupted from damaged components, sending shockwaves across the crystalline landscape. In the distance, other Devourer installations began showing signs of system failures as communication networks collapsed. "Target neutralized," Sarah reported, already breaking down her rifle for rapid movement. "Relay is offline and burning, secondary effects spreading to related systems." Marcus was packing his spotting equipment with the efficient movements of someone who had practiced this routine thousands of times. "Beautiful shot," he said with genuine admiration. 43 miles through impossible conditions, and you threaded it through a gap that existed for a tenth of a second. Captain Sterling's voice carried new urgency. "Outstanding work, Alpha. Now move fast. Those reinforcements just doubled their approach speed. Extraction point in 12 minutes." The withdrawal was a controlled sprint across terrain that challenged every enhancement the team had received. Sarah's reinforced bones absorbed impacts that would have shattered normal human skeletons. Her enhanced cardiovascular system maintained peak performance despite atmospheric conditions that would have incapacitated unmodified soldiers. Behind them, the destroyed relay continued to burn with fires that cast alien shadows across the crystalline landscape. They reached the extraction point with 3 minutes to spare, but the Devourer reinforcements were visible on the horizon, moving with inhuman speed across terrain that would have stopped conventional vehicles. The extraction ship descended from orbit like a falling star, its Confederation engines creating atmospheric distortions that made reality ripple. As they lifted away from Zirian 7, Sarah watched through the ship's viewports as the relay's destruction triggered system failures across an entire continent. Communication networks collapsed, defensive installations went offline, and coordination between Devourer forces dissolved into chaos. A single shot had accomplished what 3 major military operations had failed to achieve. "Mission success," Captain Sterling reported to Fleet Command. "Primary objective destroyed. Secondary effects exceeding all projections. Recommend immediate follow-up operations to exploit the communications breakdown." The ship's acceleration pressed them into their seats as they climbed toward orbit and safety. Through the viewport, Sarah could see Confederation fleets moving toward Zirian 7, ready to exploit the chaos that one human sniper had created with 18 months of preparation and a single impossible shot. General Morrison's voice came through the communication system from Earth, carrying satisfaction that was audible across interstellar distances. "Longshot Alpha, this is Command. Outstanding work. Intelligence reports that your shot has triggered system failures across 12 Devourer worlds. The Confederation Council is requesting immediate expansion of Project Longshot." Sarah smiled as Earth appeared in the viewport, blue and peaceful, and unaware that its future had just been secured by weekend warriors who had learned to take alien warfare seriously. The galaxy was about to discover what humans could accomplish when they applied their talent for obsessive preparation to problems that spanned star systems. Behind them, Zirion 7 continued its liberation, as Confederation forces exploited the chaos created by one perfect shot. Ahead of them, Earth waited with new recruits who would learn that human limitations were just suggestions that could be overcome with enough training and the right motivation. The war against the Devourers was far from over, but for the first time in 50 years, it was a war that could be won. Because humans had brought something new to the galaxy's oldest conflict, the ability to make impossible shots when everything depended on getting it right the first time. Sarah began cleaning her rifle as Earth grew larger in the viewport, preparing for the next impossible mission that would require a weekend warrior to save civilizations that had forgotten how to exceed their own limitations. The galaxy was learning that humans were not limited by their biology, but liberated by their refusal to accept that anything was truly impossible.